We spend so much time and energy thinking about one single question in the world of money, a question that really dominates the conversation. And that question is, of course, how do you get rich, right? It's what every book and every YouTube video seems to be about. It's the big, flashy, exciting goal. But what if I told you that's only half the battle? And maybe it's not even the most important half. Because there's this other question, a much harder, much less glamorous, but way more important question. How do you stay rich? It turns out the skills you need for that are a totally different ballgame. So let's really get into this. The core idea here is that getting wealthy and staying wealthy aren't just different skills. In a lot of ways, they are complete opposites. Just look at this contrast. Getting money requires taking big risks. It demands optimism, sometimes to the point of being a little bit crazy. You have to really put yourself out there. But keeping that money, that's a whole different mindset. It requires humility, a healthy dose of fear, the understanding that everything you've gained can be lost in a heartbeat. It's about being frugal and a little paranoid, not bold and aggressive. And to really get our heads around this, there's no better way than to look at a cautionary tale, the story of a tragic genius who was an absolute master at getting rich and a complete failure at staying that way. Let me tell you about a guy named Jesse Livermore. By pretty much every account, he was one of the greatest stock market speculators of all time. I mean, this guy was a wizard at the game of getting rich. Think about this. During the massive stock market crash of 1929, when the world was falling apart and people were losing everything, Livermore made a series of massive bets against the market. In one day, he made the equivalent of $3 billion in today's money. Just incredible. And yet, just 4 short years later, it was all gone, every single penny. Why? Because that massive success went to his head. He became overconfident, thought he was invincible, and kept making bigger and bigger bets. He was a genius at getting rich, but he had no idea how to stay rich. So, if being a financial genius like Livermore isn't enough, what is? What's the real secret? The ultimate edge when it comes to long-term success? It really comes down to this one simple, powerful word: survival. That's it. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's not about having the perfect strategy. It's just about being able to stick around long enough to endure the crazy ups and downs without getting knocked out of the game, because that's the only way the magic of compounding has enough time to do its thing. And who is the undisputed champion of survival? Warren Buffett. I mean, his real secret isn't that he's a stock-picking savant. It's that he started investing when he was a kid and he simply never stopped. He's lived through and invested through 14 recessions. 14! He never panicked. He was never forced to sell. That longevity, that's his superpower. There's this great story about a guy named Rick Guerin. Buffett himself said Guerin was just as smart, just as talented as he and his partner Charlie Munger. But Guerin had one fatal flaw. He was in a hurry. So back in the big downturn of the mid-70s, Guerin was using a ton of leverage, borrowed money, to juice his returns. Well, when the market crashed, he got margin called. He had to sell his stocks at the worst possible time. And guess who he sold them to? His friend, Warren Buffett, who was sitting on a pile of cash ready to pounce. See? Both were brilliant, but only one had made survival his top priority. And this quote from Nassim Taleb just nails it. Having an edge is secondary to avoiding ruin at all costs. It doesn't matter how amazing your strategy is if one bad outcome can wipe you out completely. Staying in the game is everything. So, how do we actually do this? How do we build this survival mindset into our own approach? Well, it really boils down to 3 key ideas. First, you've got to aim to be financially unbreakable, not just chase huge gains. Second, you have to plan on your plan failing. Sounds weird, I know, but we'll get into it. And third, you need to develop this kind of strange personality trait. You have to be optimistic, but at the same time, paranoid. Okay, let's talk about being unbreakable. We all look at cash sitting in a bank account and think, the return on this is terrible. But that's missing the point. What's the real return on cash? Well, if that cash is what prevents you from having to sell your stocks in the middle of a brutal crash, its return isn't 1 or 2%. It's basically infinite. It keeps you alive. It lets you survive to fight another day. All right, point number 2, plan on the plan failing. Look, the most important part of any plan is planning for the parts that you can't see coming. Nobody's spreadsheet predicted 9/11 or the 2008 crisis or a global pandemic.
History is just one surprise after another. That's why you need a margin of safety, some room for error. You need to build a plan that doesn't shatter when the world inevitably goes a little crazy.
And that brings us to the last, and maybe the most fascinating piece of this whole puzzle. This weird, two-sided personality you have to adopt for long-term success. Here's the deal. You have to be an optimist about the long term. You have to believe that over the next 10, 20, 30 years, things will generally get better, and the odds are in your favor. That's what gives you the courage to invest your money in the first place. But you have to be deeply paranoid about the short term. You have to be obsessed with all the things that could go wrong right now. A recession, a crash, losing your job, all the landmines that could blow you up before you ever get to see that beautiful long-term future. And that brings us right back to our tragic genius, Jesse Livermore, who really learned this lesson the hard way. He said it perfectly himself. A swelled head is an expensive disease. In the end, it was his own confidence, his own lack of paranoia that cost him everything. See, getting rich is one thing, but staying rich, that's a game of survival. And survival always, always starts with humility.